Hello, this is Rod Martin. In this video, we will be looking at Exposing the Big Lie. Verdict: CO2 not guilty. Al Gore and the entire warming alarmist movement left themselves wide open for debunking when the former vice president showed this graph. He implied that global warming is bad and that CO2 is driving it. When he showed this graph, he implied that the monstrous increases in CO2 were going to cook the planet.
Now, an important point. In all of this time, 650,000 years, the CO2 level has never gone above 300 parts per million. Now, as I said, they can also measure temperature. Here's what the temperature has been on our Earth. Now, one thing that kind of jumps out at you is, well, let me put it this way. If my classmate from the 6th grade that talked about Africa and South America were here, he would say, did they ever fit together? Most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. But they did, of course. And the relationship is actually very complicated, but there is one relationship that is far more powerful than all the others, and it is this. When there is more carbon dioxide, the temperature gets warmer because it traps more heat from the sun inside. In the parts of the United States that contain the modern cities of Cleveland, Detroit, New York, in the northern tier, this is the difference between a nice day and having a mile of ice over your head. Keep that in mind when you look at this fact. Carbon dioxide, having never gone above 300 parts per million, here is where CO2 is now.
If CO2 created this warming, then why isn't the current warming up here? The greenhouse effect isn't slow. How long does it take to warm up a car sitting in the bright sunlight with the windows rolled up? Minutes, not centuries. CO2 is real. The greenhouse effect is real. We've had very real warming. But the evidence right in front of our eyes shows that something else is controlling temperature. The increase in CO2 coinciding with global warming was an accidental coincidence, not a cause and effect coincidence. Scientists have already showed that the warming on Gore's graph, on the tens to hundreds of thousands of years scale, was caused by something else and controlled how much CO2 came out of the ocean. CO2 did not control temperature. Gore got it backwards. And if we look more closely at the scientist's graph, we see that there are places when the warming abruptly stopped, followed by massive cooling, but CO2 kept going up. The increasing CO2 could not stop the falling temperatures. Conclusion: CO2 is not guilty of causing the beneficial global warming that makes droughts more rare, deserts smaller, and violent storms more rare. In other videos from this channel, we've seen that warming in an ice age is a good thing. Throughout history, warming has brought us prosperity. Cooling has led to repeated famines and societal collapses. So not only is global warming not a crime, CO2 is not guilty of that warming. The extra CO2 is greening the world. CO2 is pro-life, and those who are clamoring to sequester CO2 are pro-death.